routine drill turned deadly when a recruit snapped. Before anyone could react, the nurse was already on him, barehanded, fearless. The weapon clattered to the ground, and the recruits just stared. Lieutenant Nicole Nikki Thompson had been assigned to Naval's Special Warfare Training Center in Coronado for exactly 14 weeks. At 5 feet 5 inches with dark blonde hair typically braided in a practical military style and hazel eyes that conveyed both professional competence and genuine compassion, she moved through her nursing duties with the kind of methodical efficiency that made her blend seamlessly into the training environment. She carried her medical equipment with practiced precision, treated injuries with expert clinical care, and maintained the kind of supportive presence that characterized dedicated military nurses. To the SEAL candidates and training staff, she was simply their assigned medical officer, competent, caring, and completely predictable in her professional role. The candidates knew her primarily through medical encounters and casual observation. Ma'am, when they required medical attention, Lieutenant Thompson, when discussing her professional capabilities, or Nurse Thompson, in routine conversation. None of them had ever questioned her background beyond basic medical training, though some had noticed that she moved with unusual confidence and seemed remarkably calm during high-stress training situations that typically elevated everyone's anxiety levels. Lieutenant Thompson's daily routine was systematic and nurturing. She arrived early to review candidate medical histories, attended comprehensive training briefings where she listened intently to tactical discussions, positioned herself strategically during exercises to provide optimal medical coverage, and delivered medical care with efficiency that suggested extensive emergency response experience. Her competence was universally acknowledged, her professionalism was exemplary, but her personal background remained essentially unknown to everyone at the facility. But the unknown can be dangerous, especially when it involves people whose true qualifications exceed their apparent roles. Welcome to Silent Salute, where we discover that extraordinary capabilities often hide behind the most compassionate professional assignments. Before we continue this incredible story, tell us in the comments which country you're watching from today. And if you believe that the most dangerous people are often those who appear most harmless, hit that subscribe button to support our channel. We're honored to share these remarkable stories with you. Hell Week preparation for Class 307 was reaching critical intensity. 29 candidates from diverse military backgrounds, all pushing through training designed to identify and develop America's most elite naval warriors. The daily regimen was relentless, grueling physical conditioning, advanced weapons training, underwater demolition exercises, tactical simulations, and psychological challenges that tested every aspect of human endurance and mental resilience. Through it all, Lieutenant Thompson provided medical support with the same steady professionalism that had characterized her entire assignment. The candidates had developed standard perceptions about her role and personality. She was professional medical support who ensured they remained healthy enough to continue the punishing training cycle. Her medical knowledge was comprehensive, her emergency response skills were excellent, and her ability to handle training-related injuries was unquestioned. But she was also remarkably composed under pressure, never seeming rattled by the intense atmosphere that characterized SEAL training environments. Among the candidates was Petty Officer First Class Ryan Hammer Davis, a former Marine Corps infantry veteran who'd served multiple combat deployments before applying for SEAL training. Davis was respected by his fellow candidates for his combat experience and leadership qualities, but he shared the common assumption that medical personnel operated outside the warrior culture that defined special operations training. Lieutenant Thompson is solid, Davis had commented to his teammate during their 13th week, probably the most unflappable medical officer I've worked with. Nothing seems to stress her out, even when training gets really intense. Seaman First Class Tony Martinez, who'd served as a Navy gunner's mate before SEAL training, offered his perspective. Some medical personnel just have that natural calm under pressure, Davis. She probably has good emergency room experience or something that prepared her for high-stress medical situations. But Martinez's theory didn't account for the specific type of composure Lieutenant Thompson displayed, the kind that suggested experience with situations far more dangerous than emergency medical care. The situation that would reveal everything began during the 14th week of training when Class 307 was scheduled for Advanced Weapons Handling Assessment. This was one of the most critical phases of SEAL training, where candidates demonstrated mastery of various firearms, explosive devices, and tactical weapons systems that formed the foundation of Special Operations combat capability. Lieutenant Thompson was assigned to provide medical oversight for the weapons training evolution, positioned at her standard observation point, where she could monitor candidates for signs of distress while remaining ready to respond to accidents or injuries. Her role was essentially what it had always been: professional medical support and emergency response capability. The training was being conducted at the Advanced Weapons Facility, with realistic scenarios that tested every aspect of candidate proficiency. The exercises were carefully controlled, with multiple safety protocols and experienced weapons instructors supervising every phase of the complex training evolution. Among the candidates participating in the weapons assessment was Petty Officer Second Class Derek "Viper" Johnson, a former Army specialist whose transition from traditional military service to SEAL training had been more challenging than anticipated. Johnson had been struggling with the psychological pressures of SEAL training, and his performance had been increasingly erratic as the stress accumulated. The morning weapons training session had proceeded normally, with candidates demonstrating proficiency with various firearms and tactical scenarios. Johnson's performance had been adequate, but showed signs of the stress and frustration that had been building throughout his training cycle. During the afternoon session, candidates were conducting advanced tactical shooting exercises that required split-second decision-making and precise weapons handling under simulated combat conditions. The scenarios were designed to test judgment, accuracy, and stress management in situations that replicated operational environments. Lieutenant Thompson was positioned at her standard medical station, monitoring candidate performance and maintaining readiness for emergency response. Her attention was focused on potential injury risks while observing the complex tactical exercises that tested candidate capabilities under realistic stress conditions. The critical moment began when Johnson's tactical scenario required him to clear a simulated building while engaging multiple targets under time pressure. The exercise was designed to test decision-making under stress, but for Johnson, the accumulated pressure of weeks of intensive training reached a breaking point. Instead of following the prescribed tactical procedures, Johnson began displaying erratic behavior that suggested psychological breakdown under training stress. His movements became unpredictable, his target engagement became random, and his communication with instructors became incoherent. The weapons instructors recognized signs of psychological distress and began implementing safety protocols to remove Johnson from the exercise before his condition could create danger for himself or other candidates. Standard procedure required immediate cessation of training and psychological evaluation. But psychological breakdowns during weapons training can escalate rapidly and unpredictably, especially when individuals are handling loaded firearms and have been pushed beyond their psychological limits by intensive training programs. Johnson's response to instructor intervention was not compliance with safety protocols. Instead, his psychological distress escalated into something much more dangerous: active resistance to authority combined with retention of a loaded weapon and increasingly erratic behavior that posed immediate threat to everyone in the facility. "I'm not going to quit," Johnson shouted, turning his weapon toward the instructors who were attempting to de-escalate the situation. "You people don't understand what I've been through. I deserve to be here." The situation had instantly transformed from routine training exercise to active shooter scenario. Johnson was armed with a loaded rifle, displaying obvious psychological instability and threatening violence against military personnel who were simply trying to help him manage training stress. The weapons instructors began implementing lockdown procedures while attempting to talk Johnson into surrendering his weapon and accepting psychological evaluation. Their approach was professional and designed to de-escalate the situation without forcing confrontation that could result in injuries or fatalities. "Johnson, put the weapon down," Senior Chief Petty Officer Williams called out with calm authority. "Nobody wants to hurt you. We just need you to put the rifle down so we can help you work through whatever you're dealing with." But Johnson's psychological state had deteriorated beyond rational response to authority or logical discussion of his situation. His grip on the weapon tightened, and his behavior became increasingly threatening as he swept the rifle across the training area, pointing it at various personnel. The candidates who had been participating in training exercises immediately sought cover behind protective barriers, while instructors attempted to coordinate response that would neutralize the threat without causing unnecessary harm to Johnson or other personnel. Lieutenant Thompson was positioned approximately 30 feet from Johnson's location, with limited cover available and direct exposure to potential weapon fire if the situation escalated to active shooting. The standard medical protocol would be to seek maximum protection and wait for security forces to neutralize the threat. Instead, she did something that shocked everyone who witnessed it. While instructors were attempting to negotiate with Johnson and candidates were seeking protective cover, Lieutenant Thompson began moving directly toward the armed and psychologically unstable individual with deliberate, controlled movement that suggested she knew exactly what she was doing. Her approach was neither hasty nor hesitant. It was the kind of purposeful advance that comes from extensive training in crisis intervention and tactical response to armed threats. She moved with confidence that suggested experience in similar situations. "Johnson," Lieutenant Thompson called out in a voice that carried absolute authority despite the obvious danger. "You need to put that weapon down right now." Johnson turned toward her, and for a moment his erratic behavior seemed to pause as he processed the unexpected sight of the medical officer advancing toward him instead of seeking cover like everyone else in the facility. "Stay back," Johnson shouted, raising the rifle in her direction. "I don't want to hurt anyone, but I'm not going to let you people destroy my career." But Lieutenant Thompson continued her advance, and what she said next revealed capabilities that no one at the training facility had suspected. "Johnson, I understand you're under stress, but pointing that weapon at people isn't going to solve your problems. I'm going to help you, but first you need to put the rifle down." Her voice carried the kind of calm authority that comes from extensive experience managing dangerous situations involving armed individuals. This wasn't medical training. This was tactical communication designed to manage armed threats. Johnson's response was to tighten his grip on the weapon and maintain his threatening posture. But something about Lieutenant Thompson's approach seemed to be affecting his psychological state in ways that traditional instructor intervention had not. "I said stay back," Johnson repeated, but his voice carried less conviction than before, and his weapon handling became slightly less threatening as Lieutenant Thompson continued her controlled advance. What happened next took less than 10 seconds, but demonstrated tactical capabilities that exceeded those of most military personnel. When Lieutenant Thompson closed to within 8 feet of Johnson's position, she transitioned from verbal de-escalation to direct physical intervention with speed and precision that seemed to come from extensive training in disarming techniques and close-quarters combat. Her movement was explosive and perfectly timed. She closed the remaining distance to Johnson before he could react, used tactical footwork to position herself outside his weapon's effective engagement angle, and executed a disarmament technique that combined striking, leverage, and weapon retention procedures. The rifle was removed from Johnson's hands and secured before he could fire a single round. Her technique was textbook perfect, a combination of hand-to-hand combat skills and weapons retention procedures that neutralized the threat with minimal risk of injury to anyone involved. Johnson was on the ground, disarmed, and controlled by submission techniques that prevented any possibility of continued resistance. The entire sequence had demonstrated combat training that far exceeded medical education. "Threat neutralized," Lieutenant Thompson reported calmly. "One individual secured, weapon recovered and safe, no injuries to personnel. Request security response for psychological evaluation and custody transfer." The entire sequence had lasted less than 10 seconds. The armed and psychologically unstable individual had been transformed from deadly threat to secured person requiring medical and psychological care. The weapons training facility was absolutely silent. 29 SEAL candidates, multiple weapons instructors, and senior training personnel stood frozen, staring at a medical officer who had just disarmed an armed threat using techniques that exceeded the tactical capabilities of most special operations personnel. Senior Chief Williams was the first to speak, and his voice was filled with the kind of recognition that comes from understanding exceptional tactical capability. "Lieutenant Thompson," Williams said quietly, "where did you learn those disarmament techniques?" Lieutenant Thompson was checking Johnson's condition while responding. Previous assignments required integration of medical and tactical capabilities. You can't provide medical care in hostile environments if you can't neutralize threats that prevent you from reaching patients who need help. Davis approached Lieutenant Thompson with obvious respect and amazement. "Ma'am, that was some of the most professional tactical intervention I've ever seen. What kind of training teaches those techniques?" Lieutenant Thompson's answer provided insight into experience that most military medical personnel never encounter. Combat medical operations in denied territory, hostage rescue medical support, and crisis intervention where traditional security forces weren't available or sufficient for mission requirements. Martinez asked the question everyone was thinking. "Lieutenant, what kind of assignments were you involved in that required those capabilities?" Lieutenant Thompson's response was carefully measured while providing some context for her unusual skill set. Specialized medical operations where traditional boundaries between medical and tactical responsibilities didn't exist, and where mission success required capability to function as both medical professional and tactical operator. Senior Chief Williams, who had witnessed the entire incident, understood that Lieutenant Thompson's demonstration had revealed capabilities that fundamentally changed understanding of her role and qualifications. "Lieutenant Thompson," Williams said, "I think we need to discuss how your tactical experience might contribute to our advanced training programs." Lieutenant Thompson accepted the expanded discussion, understanding that her tactical intervention had revealed capabilities that could benefit SEAL training in ways that had never been available before. Over the following days, more details about Lieutenant Thompson's background began to emerge through official channels and informal discussions with senior personnel who had clearance to access classified service records. Her previous assignments had included service with Joint Special Operations Command medical units that provided tactical medical support for the most classified and dangerous missions in the special operations community. Her training had included advanced combat medicine, tactical intervention, hostage rescue medical support, and crisis management in environments where medical personnel had to function as combatants. "What we're learning," Senior Chief Williams explained to the training staff, "is that Lieutenant Thompson represents a new generation of military medical professionals who are trained to operate in environments where traditional distinctions between medical and tactical roles don't exist." Lieutenant Thompson worked with the training staff to develop enhanced crisis management scenarios that tested candidates' ability to respond to psychological breakdowns, tactical emergencies, and situations where standard procedures were insufficient for mission requirements. "The operations I supported," Lieutenant Thompson explained to the candidates, "required understanding that effective military medicine often involves tactical response to threats that prevent medical care from being provided. You can't save lives if you can't neutralize dangers that threaten both patients and medical personnel." Her training scenarios included realistic crisis situations where candidates had to manage armed threats while providing medical care, tactical intervention exercises where medical personnel led emergency response, and decision-making scenarios where medical and security requirements had to be balanced under extreme stress. The weapons instructors who had witnessed Lieutenant Thompson's tactical intervention became regular participants in the enhanced training programs. Their weapons expertise was integrated with Lieutenant Thompson's crisis management experience, creating training that reflected the complex coordination required for actual special operations environments. "Working with Lieutenant Thompson," Senior Chief Williams told the candidates, "demonstrates why modern special operations require personnel who can integrate multiple capabilities seamlessly. Medical expertise and tactical proficiency aren't separate skills. They're components of comprehensive operational capability." The candidates quickly learned that Lieutenant Thompson's tactical experience provided insights that enhanced every aspect of their training. Her understanding of crisis management, threat assessment, and decision-making under extreme stress created learning opportunities that exceeded anything available through conventional training methods. Davis, who had initially viewed Lieutenant Thompson as simply professional medical support, became one of her most engaged students. "Lieutenant, your approach to integrating medical and tactical capabilities has completely changed how I think about operational readiness. You've shown us that the most effective operators are those who can respond to any situation with appropriate capabilities." Martinez, the former gunner's mate, was particularly influenced by Lieutenant Thompson's perspective on weapons and tactical training. "Ma'am, Your experience has taught me that effective tactical training must account for psychological factors and crisis management, not just weapons proficiency. The enhanced training programs that Lieutenant Thompson developed were eventually adopted throughout Naval Special Warfare Command, establishing new standards for integrated crisis management capability. Her methods influenced special operations training worldwide and enhanced the effectiveness of military personnel in managing complex emergency situations. But perhaps Lieutenant Thompson's greatest contribution was demonstrating that true operational excellence required preparation for situations that exceeded standard training scenarios. Her experience supporting classified operations had provided insights that enhanced training for all special operations personnel. The story of Lieutenant Thompson's tactical intervention became legendary at the training facility, shared with new classes as an example of how extraordinary capabilities often hide behind routine professional assignments. Her example reminded candidates that in special operations, the most valuable people are often those whose true experience and capabilities remain carefully concealed behind standard military roles. The most important lesson you can learn here, instructors would tell new candidates, is that exceptional capability often comes in unexpected forms. The person providing medical support might be someone who's handled crises more dangerous than anything you'll encounter in training. Years later, when Lieutenant Thompson transitioned to other assignments, her legacy lived on in the enhanced training programs she developed and in the understanding that true professional excellence often requires maintaining operational security about tactical capabilities and specialized experience. Her story reminded everyone that in naval special warfare, as in life, the most dangerous assumptions are those we make about people who seem to fit perfectly into support roles, because the most exceptional people are often those who choose to hide their extraordinary tactical capabilities behind compassionate professional responsibilities. Lieutenant Thompson's tactical intervention became synonymous with the integration of medical and crisis management excellence, representing the highest standards of special operations capability and the understanding that the most effective military personnel are those who can respond to any situation with appropriate skills and decisive action. The moment when she had disarmed Johnson in less than 10 seconds had demonstrated not just individual capability, but a broader understanding of how military training must prepare personnel for situations that exceed standard operational parameters. Her willingness to share tactical experience through training development showed that true professionalism continues long after specialized assignments end. The sight of that rifle clattering to the ground while Johnson lay secured had lasted only seconds, but its impact continued for years, reminding everyone that extraordinary tactical capabilities often hide behind the most caring professional appearances, and that the people we trust for support may be the ones with the most important skills to share about handling the unexpected. This story was brought to you by Silent Salute. Before we leave you today, here's our question. Have you ever discovered that someone you knew in a caregiving or support capacity actually possessed extraordinary tactical or crisis management capabilities that they kept hidden? Have you encountered people whose professional roles concealed remarkable abilities to handle dangerous situations? Tell us in the comments about the moments when you realized you'd been working alongside someone whose crisis management experience exceeded your own understanding. And if you believe that the most capable people are often those who don't need to advertise their abilities, hit that subscribe button to support our channel. Every story reminds us that extraordinary tactical capabilities often hide behind compassionate professional roles, and that the people we notice least may be the ones with the most to teach us about handling the unexpected. We'll see you in the next story, where we'll discover another incredible tale of hidden expertise and unexpected revelation.